Hello, and welcome to Human Behavior 101. You're here to learn how to behave like a human. I assume that, like me, you are already wearing your holographic disguise. So, that's a good start. Now, it should be noted that humans wear articles of clothing known as shirts. These contain sleeves in which they put their two arms in. I realize I held up 4 of the human fingers, but 2 for each hand. Fingers are an extension of their hands. They have 4 fingers and 1 thumb on each hand. The thumb is what they use to grab and hold things. It's necessary for them to do things like turn doorknobs. Obviously, we don't use those, but you'll need to practice using your thumbs in your human disguise. Now, as I said, humans wear shirts with sleeves. Now, sometimes their shirts do not have sleeves. Very rarely, some very odd humans will wear sleeves with no shirts, but you can pretty much disregard those. Other articles of clothing include pants, which are like shirts, but they only have 2 holes, 1 for each leg. Yes, humans only have 4 appendages, not including their kind of round head. So, this should be noted. Never leave your assigned base without your human disguise, and keep in mind the location of your arms and legs. When walking through a human city, note that you should be walking upright. Humans do not walk using all 4 limbs. This is very important. Yes, it's inefficient, or could be anyway. The reality is, humans walk by leaning forward and letting gravity pull them. So they're in a constant balancing act, but because of that, their mobility is somewhat more efficient because they only need to expend energy using 2 legs and they're using gravity to help them. Now, they can't go very fast. Doing this, even their fastest Olympic sprinter is fairly slow by our standards, but it's still fairly efficient for generally getting around. So if they see you moving too fast or on all 4s, you will draw attention to yourself. You do not want that. Humans do not like to stand out. Some do, and they're famous. Some others do, and they're infamous. The difference between fame and infamy is people like the famous ones, and people also like the infamous ones, but the infamous ones end up in human prisons. So, or they become infamous after they, which we want to avoid. So, as far as other human etiquette, when they eat, they use their one mouth. So you will need to use this mouth up here in order to eat your food. Note that you should not lean down to eat your food with just your mouth, but rather they use something called utensils. Depending on where you are and what meal you're eating, these utensils are very different. If you are in some of the Eastern countries, or Eastern by their standards, it's a globe, and East and West are directions, so technically anywhere is East and anywhere is West, depending on which direction you're traveling. But if you are going off of the human idea of East versus West, which you'll be given, should be given that information in your packet for assimilating into Earth. But if you're assigned to an Eastern area, they will probably be using something called chopsticks, which are 2 sticks that are held with one hand and you grab it like you grab your food as though you are pinching it, and then you bring it up to your mouth. Other places use what is called a fork, which is a single, usually metal utensil that has a slight scoop to it, and then typically four prongs that they call tines, and this is used to stab or scoop up food and bring it to your mouth. Now, some food is called finger food, like sandwiches and pizza. These you should just eat using your fingers. So these. You pick it up and you bring it, again, to your one mouth. If you try eat it with any of your other mouths, it is going to draw an immense amount of suspicion because humans do not have more than one mouth. This is very important. Some food is tougher and requires a knife to cut before picking up with a fork. If you are eating somewhere in, again, one of the Eastern nations and they are using the chopsticks, then food is usually pre-cut, so you don't have to cut it. Everywhere, when eating liquid foods such as soup, which comes in a bowl, almost everywhere uses something called a spoon, which is a convex scooping utensil for holding liquid. Again, bring this up to your mouth, not the other way around. Although in some instances it is acceptable to pick up a bowl and slurp the soup or drink the soup. Slurping may or may not be acceptable depending on where you're at. If you are in a Western country, some of them it is unacceptable, and in some places you are expected to slurp loudly to show that you enjoy it. So, again, your packet based on which region you're assimilating with should contain all the details for local etiquette. But in this training video, we will simply be giving you the general details so that you are prepared and understand what you're getting into when you read your briefing packet. Now, again, it is very important that you keep your holographic suit on at all times. Yes, there is this slight rippling effect. Hopefully, by the time you get your holographic suit, they will have worked that out a little bit. But this is just a training example. So, other things to note. Humans require blinking with their eyeballs. This keeps their optical receptors moist, which is required so that they do not dry out. If you do not blink, this will cause suspicion. If you blink with more than one set of eyelids at a time, this will cause even more suspicion. Humans only have one pair of eyelids, the top one and the bottom one. And the bottom one doesn't really move. It's mostly the top one. The top one comes down. So you may need to practice with that, though the holographic suit should compensate for any missteps. Other things to note, most humans expect that you will be looking at them. A lot of them will use the phrase looking them in the eye. This is not actually the case. Autistic people have trouble looking at or maintaining eye contact, as they call it. So they're used to some inconsistencies there, so you should be okay. Shouldn't draw too much suspicion. But eye contact doesn't actually mean looking directly into their eyes. If you do this for too long, it will be conceived or perceived. Conceived is a completely different word. It will be perceived one of two ways. It will either be perceived as hostile or flirtatious. And as we are not trying to integrate that way with humanity, and we are also simply trying to observe without causing any fights, it's best to avoid direct eye contact for prolonged periods of time. When making eye contact, you simply look in the general direction of their face. That is more than enough. Other things to note: humans speak only with their one mouth, and they use their voice box. If you speak from anywhere else, it is going to again raise suspicion, probably drastically. It should also be noted that humans have something called gaslighting. So if you do somehow slip up and a human thinks that you are not from Earth, you can simply tell them to go ahead and tell somebody, because that person that they tell will think that they're crazy. At which point, the human will probably not tell anybody because they will believe you that they will be thought of as crazy, or they will tell somebody and the other people will also think that they're crazy. Humans don't like to believe new concepts that they haven't witnessed personally themselves. It's very difficult for them to grasp things outside their perceived reality. And even when confronted with obvious facts, many humans will simply deny them. So we anticipate the observation and integration into human society to go fairly well, and you shouldn't worry too much about any accidental slip-ups. However, you must report any slip-ups to whoever is in command of your integration unit, so that we can keep track of whoever did observe you and note their behavior. As again, we are here to observe humans, and any alterations to their behavioral pattern is still excellent observational data. Now, something you may have noticed I've been doing during this training video is kind of scratching at my face. This is something humans do. Human skin is made up of multiple layers and is very sensitive, as they don't have any protective fur. This causes some occasional itchiness. So you should at times just kind of scratch itches. That way people will think that this is normal behavior. Because again, it's the small nuanced details. Humans are very detail oriented. If you do not display nuanced details in your behavior, then humans will become suspicious. Now, that is it for training video number 1. When finished with this, you can always revisit this training video, and of course, if there are any incidents, you may be referred back to this training video. Something else to note: humans a lot of times don't think before they speak, which results in them saying a lot. Again, you may have noticed this behavioral pattern during this video, so make sure you integrate that into your speech pattern. Or are both acceptable periodically, not necessarily all the time. For rehearsed speeches, it shouldn't be a thing, but again, we are trying to be as human as possible for this training video. Thanks for watching, and please observe the next training video at your earliest convenience.